Okay, good morning, everyone. I've just finished watching not that long ago the Paraguay Turkey game a couple of hours ago. I've had a few late nights watching the football. I haven't watched every game, but it's been a fantastic tournament so far. In regards to the games that I've watched, I've not seen a bad game yet. I wouldn't have thought. The fan atmosphere is better than I thought it would be. Um, we've heard of all the controversy about the World Cup, uh, you know, um, in the build up with ticket prices and hotel prices and travel prices and visa restrictions, and there have been some negative stories, but for the most part, the fan takeover of North American cities has been absolutely fantastic. The fan zones have been well filled, and this is considering that not as many fans as projected have travelled. There have been some empty seats at stadiums, but it's been a fantastic tournament so far. It's not even 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm awake. So there we go. Mm, nice healthy start to the day. Uh, it's been a fantastic tournament so far. There's been a lot of goals scored. Only one goalless game so far. So I'll be looking at the goals per game average later today. Um, Viewers from all around the world have watched my match reviews, which is kind of nice. So we've had match reviews from all over. Viewers from America are up. Viewers from Germany are up. South Korea as well. I've had viewers from South Korea. I'm looking forward to the Netherlands Sweden game. That's looking like it's going to be a cracking encounter later on today. Obviously, in the US, it's still yesterday or early hours in the morning if you're in New York and Boston. But it's been a fantastic tournament so far. Some great underdog stories like Curacao and Cape Verde doing well in their opening games. DR Congo doing well as well. So some of the lesser nations have done quite well to start the tournament. Some of the bigger nations have struggled. Spain, Portugal have looked a little bit wobbly to start the tournament. That's been a fantastic tournament so far. The one area there where fans really are annoyed is the hydration breaks. Every hydration break is getting booed by fans, which is just hilarious. Which is always, hang on. Let's save that. So it's been a fun tournament so far. Some of the goals scored have been brilliant. Like I said, some nations have underwhelmed so far. Other nations have done well. I mean, I watched the Canada Qatar game, and Canada have made history with like their best World Cup ever. Even if they don't get out the group stage, I think Canada have massively improved as a nation. The US have come on leaps and bounds. Mexico having a good start to the tournament. So the three hosts are doing well, which is always good to see. Only in two previous tournaments have the hosts failed to get out of the group stage. And I think all three co-hosts will progress to the knockout rounds. The footage that's spread around social media about a lot of especially the European fans, really enjoying the experience, and the locals enjoying the experience with them, not quite sure what to make of the Scots, the Germans, the Dutch, us, the English, the French taking over Times Square, the Scots drinking Boston out of alcohol, England and Croatia drinking one pub out of beer in 3 hours. The lack of fan trouble as well. There's only been a one flashpoint so far between Algerian and Argentinian fans in Times Square, so there's been a very, very wholesome experience so far. I will be charting goals per game average. I will be looking at goals per game average. I think it is up on the last World Cup. I think it's also up on the Russian World Cup as well. I think the goals per game average is quite high. We have had a couple of blowout scorelines. I think the 6-0 for Canada. I think the 7-1 for Germany. I think has contributed to the goals per game spiking a little bit. So it'd be interesting to chart the goals per game. We've seen more red cards in this tournament as well. Miguel Almiron is the latest player to have been sent off in a game. We saw 3 send-offs in the opening match between Mexico and South Africa. We saw 2 for Qatar. So we've seen more red cards already in the tournament than 4 years ago. The only areas where I think there are a few worries are some empty seats at games still, and the hydration breaks not going down particularly well with players, coaches, and fans. They've been very negatively received across the board. And they do tend to disrupt the momentum of games and change the momentum of games, I've noticed. But overall, I think so far I've really enjoyed the games that I've watched. I haven't watched every game because I do have a day job, and the kickoff times over here in Europe are a lot later than in previous tournaments. Although I did try and pull an all-nighter last night and this morning, and that didn't go so well. that didn't go so well. I got through the first game, the US game, then I watched the first 10 minutes of the Scotland game, fell asleep, and then woke up in time for the second half of the Paraguay Turkey game. So I tried to pull an all-nighter, and it didn't work. But I was fortunate enough to not be sleeping very well, so I managed to catch the brilliant victory for Canada in Vancouver over the Qataris. But I then fell back to sleep, so I didn't do a match review because then I had to wake up and go to work. So I will try and cover as many games this weekend as I can, and as many games next week as I can as the group stage progresses. Some of the kickoff times are favourable to my work hours, some of them not so much. So Monday, I might not be able to catch the first game in its entirety, but hopefully, I can catch as many games as possible in the group stage. The knockout stages, I think, is a little bit more favourable in regards to trying to cover as many games as possible. Normally, I would book the group stages off work, but because there's so many more teams playing now in this expanded tournament, that would have proven not feasible. I will be doing a members video explaining what's going on with work as well, because there has been a lot of changes, and it's been a very stressful couple of weeks and a long couple of weeks in the day job. The job hasn't changed; the contract has. So it's been a bit of a big change the last few weeks. But no, all things considered, this is the first World Cup where I've not been able to watch every single group game since 1994. So, but at the same time, I was a bit concerned about some of the kickoff times. I've had to cherry pick some of the games that I watch. I was a bit frustrated that in both Scotland games I've fallen asleep because they've had a later kickoff time, which is annoying. Because I've got some Scottish friends, and I want Scotland to do well. They've won their first World Cup game since 1990. They lost 1-0 against Morocco, but they're still the best third-place teams. They've just got to hope their result against Brazil is not too negative. And with Brazil-Morocco drawing that first game, it really throws that one up in the air. Haiti and Turkey have both been eliminated at this stage after just 2 games. And I've been really disappointed with Turkey. I expected more from the Turks. Australia-Paraguay is going to be a really interesting game in their group because both teams have lost 1-1. The goal differential, and a draw gets Australia through, a win gets Paraguay through. So there's a lot of permutations there. But no, it's fun seeing the debutant nations as well, like Curacao and Cape Verde and Uzbekistan and Jordan appearing at their first tournaments. I think that adds something, to the whole show. The thing is, it's a longer tournament. It's a longer group stage. It's a longer tournament in general. It's like a full extra week or 10 days worth of tournament. So it goes a bit longer. I think the fatigue factor for players will start being visible as the tournament progresses as well. But so far, I've not been overly disappointed with a lot of the games. I've actually thoroughly enjoyed what's happened on the field, at least so far. The hydration breaks, I'm going to put it this way: they are momentum swingers. They can kill momentum and they can restart momentum, but they do disrupt the flow of a game. Um, I mean, we've seen hydration breaks before at World Cups when temperature thresholds are hit. And talking about temperatures, it's going to be hot here in Northern Europe, Northwest Europe next week. Not just the UK, but across North and Western Europe, we're expecting a heat wave as well, which will be interesting. So there might be some sleepless nights to do with the heat. So I might actually watch more games than I was anticipating. Um, it's meant to get very hot today. Tomorrow is meant to be, I think, the hottest day of the year here, and then next week is going to stay hot until about Thursday, and then we're expecting thunderstorms. So it's going to be a brutally warm, hot week coming up. This will be our second or third heat wave so far. We had a warm April, we had a heat wave in May, and now we've got another one in June. So we're expecting a very hot summer. Which again, there's been a lot of fan zones and watch parties set up over here. Pubs are allowed to stay open later. The thing is, there wasn't a lot of fanfare going into the tournament because of all the controversy and because of all the negative headlines about ticket price and visa restrictions, and the hotel prices, accommodation, all sorts. There's been a lot of negativity in the build up to this tournament, more than a normal World Cup would have, even more negativity than the Qatar World Cup or the Russia World Cup, with controversies and issues. But so far, it seems to be going quite well. There's still some negative stories coming out about some of the fan zones and some of the prices, some of the concession prices. But for the most part, I think the fans, the European fans especially, and some of the South American fans have basically taken over the US and Canada and Mexico. The Aussies and Kiwis have travelled well as well. The thing is, everyone has travelled in less numbers than was anticipated. So if you imagine this, imagine if they kept prices lower for tickets and hotels and airlines, how many more fans would have travelled from South America and Europe and Australia and New Zealand? I mean, some of the pubs and bars in like Boston and Dallas and New York, and on the West Coast in like Vancouver and California are saying we're running out of beer. Imagine if all the fans had turned up that were anticipated and projected, had prices been at a more reasonable level. I think the North Americans are realizing just how boisterous and fun and colourful the experience can be. And some of the stuff shared on social media has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've got some Scottish friends, and what's happened in Boston's been brilliant. I think it's been a great advert for the Tartan Army. It's been a great advert for our cousins north of the border here in the UK. As someone who lives in England, it's a shame Wales, the Northern Irish, and the Irish haven't qualified as well. All three of those nations got close to qualification. It's a shame that some of the Celtic brethren from the British Isles haven't qualified, because I think that would have added some more colour and fun to things. Bearing in mind there is a big Irish descended community on the East Coast. There's a big Scottish and English descended community in the Northeast as well. So there's a lot of positives there. It's a shame Italy didn't qualify as well. The Italian fans are always very passionate and vibrant. But it's been a fun. I think there's been a lot of positive stories coming out around the World Cup and in the fan zones. A lot of fans have gone off the beaten track and gone to smaller towns and cities around the US in some of the outside some of the big metros to enjoy the experience, because it's cheaper to stay, and they've found families who've put rooms up for rent for them, and they found campsites, and the Scottish fans, because of the public transportation costs in Boston, have decided to rent all the school buses from the local school district, which is cost them a lot less money. So they found ingenious ways to ingratiate themselves and integrate with the locals, and a lot of locals have been very welcoming. A lot of the stereotypes, going into the tournament have been blown away, which is good. Which is good to see on a positive note, that the fan experience has been, for the most part, wholesome. This every major sporting event is going to have some negatives and some room for improvement. I do think FIFA have definitely got the ticketing wrong, and the build up wrong. I think this will be Infantino's last World Cup in charge of FIFA. I think there's going to be changes within that organisation. I think there's no other option there, because there's still empty seats at stadiums. So unless they're starting to discount tickets to get locals in, I don't know. VAR's worked quite well at the tournament. We've seen no VAR controversy. I think they've sped up that process, which is really good. It hasn't been overly controversial. We've seen, 2018 and 2022 and in recent Euros as well, VAR taking a long time, being dragged out, leading some bewildering decisions. So I think FIFA have got that one right. I think that's a win for FIFA. And so yeah, it's been a fun experience so far. I mean, the games that I'm planning to watch, definitely planning to watch, are the Netherlands, Sweden, and then Germany, Ivory Coast. And I'll see if I can get through the night and watch the other two games that are scheduled for this. In this stage of the group stage, I think there's a couple in the early hours my time. I'm really looking forward to the Netherlands, Sweden. There's going to be goals in that game. The Swedish fans are brilliant. The Norwegian fans are brilliant as well. But the Dutch have taken over Dallas with the Orange Army, which has gone viral the last couple of days. They had a big parade in Arlington where about, I think, 10, 15,000 Dutch fans turned up. They've managed to get a couple of double-decker buses imported into the US. And in order to import a vehicle into the US, it has to be older than 25 years old. They've got some of their fan buses shipped over somehow through customs. So they've really brought their orange, the Orange Army in full force to Central Texas. And the mingling of fans has been brilliant. I mean, in tournaments past, we've seen clashes between fan groups, but so far it's, apart from that little flashpoint in Times Square between the Algerians and the Argentinian fans, it has been a very positive experience. We've seen like England and Croatia fans in the build-up to the England-Croatia game, considering the rivalry between the two nations at major tournaments over the last 30 years, and in qualification as well for tournaments. Brilliant to see. Same with the Germans and the Scots in Boston. The Norwegians have got involved as well in Boston. So there's been a really good mingling of all the European fans, and it stunned the Americans about just the colour, the passion, the drinking, but not in a negative way. And the reactions from some American broadcasters and American social media influencers, they've been really stunned by the atmosphere, the togetherness of the European fans. It's similar to Germany in the Euros 2 years ago. The fan atmosphere was absolutely fantastic. We saw very little trouble in Germany 2 years ago in regards to fan disorder or hooligan elements, and that was a real positive fan fest 2 years ago. It's just, I don't think the Americans were fully prepared for the European fan culture and South American fan culture, and I include the Australians and the Kiwis in that as well, because they're sports mad and they always support their national teams really well. I don't think they were fully prepared. I think they were. I just don't. It's opened the Americans' eyes to how we support our sports teams and our national teams. It was the same at the Ice Hockey World Championships as well. I think that opened some eyes to some North American fans with the atmosphere inside. The ice hockey arenas in Switzerland last month with how the European fans. It really is an eye opener. And of course, in years to come, the US will have 2 Rugby World Cups as well. They'll have the men's and women's in a few years' time. They've got the Olympics in 2 years' time. I think there's still room for improvement in regards to the organisation, ticketing, accommodation, getting accommodation ready, and planning for the 2028 LA Olympics, and then in the I think it's 2031 and 2033 Rugby World Cups that the US are going to host. I think there's still some lessons that can be learned. I think transportation costs and stadium accessibility is definitely something that needs to be improved upon in the coming years, for fans to get to and from stadiums. I think that's something that needs to be looked at, especially for the Rugby World Cups. Some of the stadiums are not the easiest to get to with public transit, and costs to get fans to and from their hotels to some of these stadiums is a bit extortionate, and there's been a big talking point about that. And as I say, the Scottish fans have commandeered a lot of school buses to transport themselves from fan zones and hotels to the stadium in Boston. We've seen some ingenious ways to avoid the excessive parking fees and public transportation fees. There's been some very ingenious ways fans have got around that. You put obstacles in the way of European fans going to a football match, they will find ways to get around those obstacles in order to achieve their goal to get in the stadium. The games in Mexico have also been quite entertaining, very vibrant atmospheres. I mean, Mexico, obviously, the history with the World Cup that the Mexicans have with the Azteca, and are legendary from 1970 and 1986. Absolutely legendary stadium is the Azteca, and the other stadiums in Mexico that have been used in previous World Cups, and including in this one. I mean, the one in Monterrey is stunning. So it's been a real, I think, positive. I think the positives are starting to outweigh the negatives in regards to what we're seeing, especially on social media. I don't think the mainstream media over here are really covering it as much, I think, as they should. A lot of the positives that we've seen, and it was the same in Germany 2 years ago with the Euros. There was a lot of positives that weren't covered in the same way that they should have been. They tried to look at the negatives. There was a big thing about the public transportation in Germany struggling 2 years ago. That was well publicised, and fans, if they were making any complaints, were the trains were delayed and crowded, and that the German authorities hadn't quite planned for extra capacity. Yes, we've heard those complaints over in the US as well, especially. I've not heard of a lot of complaints from the games in Canada. I think they've been well received positively. And the same in Mexico. The experience in Mexico, I know someone who's just come back from Mexico who was watching a lot of games in like a bar in the resort he was staying at, where they set up a little mini fan zone. And again, it was people from around the world were engaging and watching, which was always good to see. So it has been, I think, more positives than negatives, I think, should be dominating the headlines. And for the most part, I think the tournament's gone off rather well. We haven't seen any major issues yet. And if there have been issues, fans have found workarounds. Again, transportation. Some stadiums are not ideally located and not as accessible as, let's say, a European stadium would be from a city centre. And while there's still empty seats at games, and they are visible, I think as the tournament's going on, I think the organisers might be starting to reduce ticket prices a little bit. I think locals are buying in as well. Locals are definitely buying into things. I think locals are starting to buy tickets and pick a team to follow in their city, or go to games and enjoy the experience, which I think is a massive positive. I think the fact that the US have won their opening 2 games and won well and played well. I think Canada, scoring a lot of goals. I mean, Canada have broken all their World Cup records. Mexico as well being unbeaten. I think that's helped the tournament. And yeah, having some of those fairy tale shock stories as well, like DR Congo and Cape Verde and Curacao, all getting a draw in their first games and sort of upsetting the apple cart a little bit, I think has also added something to it. It's a shame that Uzbekistan and Jordan couldn't get at least a draw in their opening games. Some of the underdogs have done quite well. Uh, and some of the big nations have not played particularly well, but it's been a fun, vibrant tournament, as I say. Um, I do think, I do think, and I will stress this: the hydration breaks being booed at every game. The the camera's always trying to like oogle the celebrities at every game. Fans don't want that. Fans just want to enjoy the sport that they're watching. So I think FIFA have got a few things wrong there with pandering to the ultra wealthy and the hydration breaks. One game, the hydration break was longer and they wouldn't kick off again until Fox Sports had finished their ad breaks. So I don't know how much the advertising slots are going for. What is really interesting to see is some foreign broadcasters, like over here in the UK, they're not putting adverts or anything like that during the hydration breaks. Telemundo, which is the Spanish language carrier in the US, which is owned by ESPN, not going with the ad breaks during the water breaks. So there has been a split in regards to broadcasters when it comes to when commercials are rolled on TV. I have noticed over here with the ITV coverage that there's a lot of ad breaks when it's at half time and in just before the game, especially at half time, they have three. So they're trying to maximize their ad revenue without actually disrupting the games because they have faced some backlash with their Six Nations coverage by showing ads during play. I think ITV have realised if we do this in the football, it's going to be a bad look. But there has been a mixed response to broadcasters and the hydration breaks with rolling ads. So I don't know what other broadcasters around the world are doing, but I know there's definitely a split in the US with Telemundo, which is the Spanish language carrier, not having ads during the hydration breaks, but Fox, which is the English language carrier, the main carrier, showing them. And there's definitely been a backlash there. I think a lot of people might be switching to Telemundo and just putting subtitles on. So Spanish commentary with English subtitles just to not have to deal with the commercialization in that sense. But no, apart from the hydration breaks and empty seats at some games, I think so far it's been good. The playing surfaces at all the stadiums have held up really well, considering a lot of the NFL stadiums have had to basically rip up their artificial turf and lay brand new grass for the tournament. And that has a knock-on impact with the NFL because the NFLPA are basically have surveyed players, and the players and coaches, basically about 90% of NFL players want to keep the grass at their stadiums. So that's really interesting. Another thing that's really interesting is how cities like Chicago and Vegas didn't get any World Cup games. I mean, Allegiant Stadium has hosted rugby league. They have a grass playing surface, so it's not as if they have to relay the playing surface. It's a climate-controlled stadium, and it's a fun, vibrant city where sports work. Chicago, the third biggest metro in the US, not having any games is a bit of a head-scratcher to me as well. I think that if they had played games in Chicago, I think that could have really benefited that metro area, which does have a wealth divide between the north of the metro and the south. I think that's a miss by FIFA and organisers. I know some cities were looking at the potential cost compared to the potential money, economic benefit that could come in, and some cities, for whatever reason, decided not to be a bid city. But it does surprise me that FIFA didn't look at Vegas and Chicago, especially. There's some other cities as well. I think that have been a little bit overlooked for games as well, which is a bit of a head scratcher. But as I say, so far it's been a fantastic tournament to watch. I think a lot of the locals have actually bought in as well, especially in the smaller towns and cities in a metro area, which aren't necessarily downtown Boston or downtown LA. Overseas fans have been creative with their accommodation and been very creative and going off the beaten track and going outside the tourist trap hotspots. And from what I've seen, a lot of locals from a lot of communities have been very, very welcoming to the fans who've travelled, especially in some parts of the US. They've really been exceptionally welcoming. to fans from overseas, allowing them in their homes and their businesses and their restaurants, and engaging with them, and giving them like a real positive vibe. So I think that's benefiting a lot of small towns and cities, in especially in the southeast of the US, the deep south, which is some parts of Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina, for example, and some fans have even turned up in Mississippi, for Christ's sake. They are very economically depressed areas. There's not a lot of employment. There's a lot of poverty. So any money spent there is obviously benefiting these small rural communities and lesser communities, which is obviously really, really positive. But yeah, it's been a fantastic on that aspect where they've gone off the beaten track. They're meeting locals in places you would never have heard of, small towns, and they're spending money in these places. They're staying in these places. It's like the Scottish fans who found an old house in Massachusetts as a bit Airbnb, about 6 or 7 of them, and they were playing the bagpipes and listening to Scottish music, Scottish rock music, till the early hours, and some of the locals were like, "What the hell's going on?" And they turned out to be a friendly bunch of lads from Glasgow. The young Hamilton academical player who'd gone over with his father and his club have found him and said, "Can you please respond to our request to return to pre-season training? We've seen you needed back in training on Friday." How big does the target have to be for Turkey to get a goal? I don't know, but they've been it's like Portugal and Spain. They've been poor. They've been very, very poor. I've been very disappointed with Spain, Portugal, and Turkey. Admittedly, Turkey played that extra game, but they haven't scored a goal. They've had, I think Turkey have had the most chances per game average than any team, most shots on and off target, but they have been exceptionally poor. There is no way around that. That's the best way I can describe things. The Turks have been poor. The Ronaldo Messi debate. Messi had a massive impact on his opening game, obviously the hat trick. He also got away with a horrendous tackle, which could have been a career ender if he got it wrong, which he did, but that should have been a straight red, and he got away with one there. And that's angered some fans that they're saying certain players are protected. Messi should have been sent for that tackle. He does have that streak in him where he will scrap and fight for everything. And I think even Messi would admit he got that tackle wrong. I think he, if he wasn't the superstar that he has become, if he was like a younger player, let's say that happened in the 2006 or even maybe 2010 World Cup, I think Messi gets sent for that. But I will say this, I think Ronaldo, I think, hurts the Portuguese attack. He did nothing in that opening game against DR Congo. I think, if anything, he hindered Portugal without the ball because he only pressed a couple of times. I don't think he actually had an attempt on target either in the game, which is something. And when we're talking about other players who are nearing the end of their careers, it doesn't matter what position. Some of other veteran players have had more impact on games than Ronaldo has. Why people see Turkey? You don't see why people see Turkey as a dark horse. O2. Well, they've started to qualify for Euros and World Cups again, and they've got some talented players. Let's not knock the Turks for the talent on the field. For whatever reason, it's just not translating in this tournament. If that was 2 years ago in Germany, they've scored those goals, they've scored those opportunities, they've won both games comfortably. They're through to the knockout stages of the tournament. Something is going wrong there. They obviously got a little bit done by Australia tactically in their opening game. They do defend with a high line. They are a possession-based team, but they're much like Spain and much like Portugal. They're too slow in possession in front of the defence, and that allows the team they're playing against to defend basically and hit them on the counter attack. Gula, I think, has been disappointing. He has been very, very disappointing. Yildiz, he's trying, but again, Turkey's been disappointing. Very, very disappointing. I do think Ronaldo is, since he's gone to Saudi Arabia, I think that was a mistake. He could have gone to the MLS and played in a more competitive league towards the end of his. He could have done what Ibrahimovic did: go to America and prolong his career in a positive way, and still contribute at club and international level, which is what Messi's doing. And people knock the MLS. I think the MLS is actually a good quality league. It's got structural issues, and the game in North America does have structural issues with player development and the lack of relegation and promotion. But Ibrahimovic, Beckham, in years past proved that you can go over to America, prolong your career because it's a less intense. It wasn't less intense, but also still then come back to Europe and then have a very good career back in Europe as a senior player in a sort of evolved role. Um, um, but Emerick Laporte, who failed at Man City, who's actually French, but he qualifies because he lived so long in Spain and he played for Bilbao because he's technically a Basque Frenchman. Emerick Laporte, I think, an overrated player. He can't defend very well. But I think anyone who plays for Man City technically can't defend very well. They get away with it because their style of play. And I think Man City are going to be in for a long trophy drought in years to come. I do actually think Man City's golden era is done now. But no, I mean, as I say, I haven't watched every game, so therefore I can't comment on how other nations have done and stuff. But from what I've seen, I was very, very disappointed with Spain. They were so, it was so, every pass was telegraphed. It was so obvious what they were going to do. They had no pace in behind. I'm still trying to scratch my head why they left Yamal and Williams on the bench to start that game, and why they brought them on so late. At which point they were coming up against a team that had already figured out their attack. Their attack was so predictable, it was slow, plodding. Everything was in front of the Cape Verde defenders, so it was literally painful to watch. I mean, Spain had all this ball, great, and it was slow and plodding, predictable. And then they had that corner right at the end, Cape Verde, where they could have scored and won. And I think that would have caused the internet to melt down. But there's definitely a lot of pressure on Spain now against better opposition in the group to play better. If Cape Verde, the weakest team in their group, can nullify them in such a way, God forbid what a better team could do with a bit more quality up front and better fitness and better quality players. The tiki-taka format is flawed. They've had to hybrid it and it doesn't work. It's beatable. But they went on to win that World Cup in 2010. That's the thing. That's the difference. Whereas, yes, they won the Euros 2 years ago, but they weren't playing the exact same style, and they utilised Yamal and Williams in a much more positive way by actually starting them, giving them a lot of minutes early on in the tournament to get them up to speed, to get them involved in the play. I'm very, very surprised that Yamal came on as late as he did in the second half. And then again, he didn't do much. And then I was also very, very surprised with Nico Williams Jr. coming on as late as he did. I know that he was coming into the game with a potential muscular injury. Could have played him an extra 10, 15 minutes in that game. So I do think tactically Spain were done there. I think their style of play is now very, very, very beatable. A lot of teams have copied that kind of possession-based football with the keeper having to be playing at his feet. No, play to your strengths. Play to your players' strengths and form your tactics around the abilities of your players. But no, I remember the dirty goal against Spain in 2010. I was in the pub at the time watching that. And again, they got done by a long ball. They were wasteful in front of goal, and they lost that 1-0. They also then went on to win the tournament. But I think this Spain side is not as good as that Spain side of 2008 to 2012. That was just a dominant Spanish team at that time with a much better midfield, a much better defence. And Spain were very suspect defensively for many, many years and still are. And they had a better goalkeeper. Paraguay just showed how to play to your strengths, even not. It does help when you score a world-class goal, a worldie, in the first minute. That does help. Not going to lie. That was a pile driver. It's one of the best goals of the tournament so far. We're not seeing a lot of range goals at the moment, but that was one of the best goals so far. Candidate for goal of the tournament. One of the top 5 goals of the tournament so far. But then the Almiron red card. I mean, I know this rule change has been brought in. There was some controversy towards the end of the season. And FIFA brought this rule in. because of that. I think it was that. Was it that Ben? Or was it the Sporting Lisbon incident, Mourinho in the Champions League, where one of his players either homophobically or racially abused another player? I think it was a Real Madrid player, and there was a big fallout from that. So FIFA have gone, okay, a bit of controversy there. Let's bring in another rule. And Miguel Almiron's got that stupidity in his game. He did it at Newcastle. I seem to remember a couple of times getting himself unnecessarily booked and sent off. So that's going to hurt Paraguay against Australia. Australia only need a draw in that game. Paraguay needs to win that game to guarantee second place. If they get a draw, their goal difference is a little bit suspect, and with the best third-place teams progressing, that doesn't help them because they will need other groups to go in their favour. But they definitely played a lot better. Paraguay played better. They turned up, and because they turned up and actually played to what they're very good at. I mean, they've beaten Brazil and Argentina in qualifying. You could argue Brazil not the team they were, but they've beaten the world champions in qualifying. They went away from that in the opening game against the US. They stuck to their traditional style in this game, win it. And they've given themselves an opportunity potentially to get through to the next round. It's the goal difference from the first game is hurting them. That's the problem. And a draw doesn't necessarily benefit them because they need other nations in other groups to have a worse record. They're relying on other. It's not. It is in their hands, but it isn't. Whereas Australia can play their natural style as well. I actually think that'll be quite an open game because both Australia, they just need a draw, but they can't rely on that. They've got to stop Paraguay from winning, basically. So the Aussies are going to have to come out and play a little bit and be very pragmatic in their style. So I think that could actually be quite an open game. Neither team. I mean, a draw does guarantee Australia through, but Paraguay will be desperate to win. That could be quite a fun game. That could be quite a fun game at the end of the group stage. That'd be the game I'll be penciling in to watch in that group at the end of the group stage. Is the Australia-Paraguay game. Because that game means something. We know the US are through. We know Turkey are out. That's the game that means something. So that's the one I'll be watching in that group. We know Canada have I think Canada are actually, with their goal difference, even if they finish third in the group, they're through to the next round. Australia also has a bad record against both South American teams at the World Cup, and I think that's the thing. That's the thing. I think Australia will have to approach it with the idea we have to win this game. They do get through with a draw, but they're going to have to win the game, plain and simple. Paraguay now obviously have Miguel Almiron suspended, and he's a good player. Almiron is actually quite a good technical player. He's got a bit of skill. He's actually quite a good player. That's a big loss for Paraguay. He's let his teammates down there. So I think that actually is going to be quite a ding-dong of a game. Both teams are going to have to go at it because Australia can't sit back. They've got to be front foot in that game because Paraguay are going to be coming at them. That's going to be a tasty one. That's a game that matters. It helps winning your opening game in the way that Australia did. They've got a neutral goal differential, whereas Paraguay have got a negative goal differential. Paraguay are going to come at them. Australia are going to have to play their best game. There's going to be lineup changes, I think, for both teams as well. They're going to have to bring other players in just to freshen it up and give something different that hasn't been seen in the opening two games because they will have scouts. They will have their chief scout going to the other game to go, right, this is the opposition we're playing next. There's going to be some enforced changes. Lecky obviously went off with an injury and Almiron's suspended. So there's going to be fresh faces in there. No, I don't think Australia didn't turn up. Paraguay didn't turn up. I think they got lucky with their opposition not turning up and not playing to their strengths and being sloppy and being ill-disciplined in their two games. They got lucky there. They are playing in a much better way than they have done in previous tournaments. This is the best American team I've ever seen. They look more confident. They look happier. They look fitter. They look quicker, more motivated, more together as a team. Their best player, Pulisic, didn't play. Still win 2-0. They didn't play as well in the second game, though. The opening game, they played really well. They've got to try and find that level again with their incisive passing, good interplay, good pace, balls over the top, balls wide, using the width, getting it out from the back quickly, taking pressure off the goalkeeper. The sweeper keeper are dynamic. Very few keepers can actually do it at that level. Not every goalkeeper is a Manuel Neuer. Let's just keep it like that. I think there's a lot of pressure put on goalkeepers now to be playing their ball playing. That's not playing to their strengths. Their strengths are keeping the ball out of the net and kicking long and throwing out and that kind of thing. I would say they've got a chance to have their best World Cup. Same with Canada. What Canada have done so far has already surpassed what they've done in previous World Cups. Mexico, when it ever have their best World Cups when they're playing in Mexico. So it'll be interesting to see how the Mexicans perform when they have to start playing games in the US, knockout games in the US, and how they perform. But there's a big Mexican American community in the US, so they will have fans in north of the border to support them. But Mexico's record outside of Mexico in World Cups is dreadful. So that's an interesting one. But Canada have surpassed all their expectations. It's going to be interesting to see how Canada play in the US as well, should they, for whatever reason, not play their first knockout game in Canada. Depending where they finish in the group, it's going to be interesting to see how the Canadians play as well outside of Canada. But so far all three host nations have started well, which is a positive. And all three host nations are unbeaten. And from the looks of it, I think they've all technically, even Canada, I can't see Canada fluffing their last game. They're all basically through to the knockout stages, which is good, which adds something to the tournament when the host nation goes on a run. In this case, we've got three host nations, and I think they could all potentially go on a bit of a run here. Canada as a nation has massively improved from where they were in the doldrums. After 1986, they did nothing until 2022. So the last 5, 6, 7 years, the Canadians have come a very long way, very, very quickly. The US have had their ups and downs, but the last 2 years has been a remarkable turnaround from where they were when they were the guest host of the Copa America, where they really were bad. And because they didn't play well, fans didn't turn up. So I think the US have a good shot. I would say quarterfinals. Just my opinion, but I'm not like the SBS commentary team and panel from here in Australia. No person who's like Les Murray, the team like. Again, I've had mixed views on the commentary over here in the UK with the two British broadcasters, so I can't comment on the Australian broadcast team. I'm not going to disrespect the Australian broadcasters. It's like when I watch the NRL. Overseas fans obviously have the opportunity to have the Watch NRL website, and you get the Fox commentary, except for State of Origin, where you get Channel 9. I prefer the Fox League commentary over Channel 9 when it comes to rugby league, and it's the same with the AFL. I prefer the Fox commentary over, Channel 7, I think it is, for the AFL. So in my opinion, and I'm not throwing any kind of disrespect towards the Australian commentators that have been selected to cover the World Cup and have been sent over to the US and Canada and Mexico to cover games, and also in their, the studio breakdown and the studio panels. But we've got Big Ange Postecoglou on ITV. We get Big Ange as a studio analyst, which is fantastic. I think it would have been cool to have Harry Kewell as well as a studio analyst, but we've got Big Ange. And both Postecoglou and Harry Kewell have both managed in England. And Big Ange has also managed in Scotland, so he resonates and has a lot of respect from fans in clubland over here. Harry Kewell has also played and now managed. So it's a shame they couldn't get Harry Kewell on the British because he's got a very good relationship with Leeds and Liverpool fandom. He's beloved at those clubs. Mark Viduka is another one, but he's obviously got his business interests. Well, he's probably doing some work for Croatian TV, I think. Mark Schwarzer, we've had do some commentary and punditry before as well. So there's a lot of great Australian players that have played here in the UK and have had really good careers in Europe. And Mark Schwarzer is fluent in German, so I wouldn't be surprised if German and Austrian TV pick up Mark Schwarzer for a few little tidbits. I would say I'm frustrated that the BBC until the quarterfinals are staying based over here in the UK, and they're just sending commentary teams out. So their studios here in the UK, whereas ITV have gone broken the bank, and their studio is in I think is it New Jersey, overlooking the Hudson River, overlooking the New York skyline, or are they based on Long Island? They're out in either New Jersey or New York State, not directly in New York City itself, but their studio is based. I think it's on Long Island. I think it's in one of the 5 boroughs of New York, but it's not downtown. And there's been a bit of criticism of the BBC not setting up a studio in the US as a US base until the latter stages, whereas ITV over here in the UK have gone, yep, we're going out, we're setting up in New York. This is where our studio is going to be. We'll have a great backdrop of the New York City skyline. But I'm not going to knock the commentators and co-commentators. I don't think they're at the same level they were in previous tournaments. I've noticed that the commentary is not where it was even 15 years ago. It's definitely at a lower level now. I'm using my laptop to watch all the games. I can stream live on the BBC iPlayer and the ITVX player, so I'm streaming on their streaming services. I haven't touched a physical TV apart from being when I watched the league. Was it League Two playoff final the other week? I watched at my mum's on TV. Apart from that, I've not watched a live sporting event on TV for FA Cup final 2020 was the last time I watched a sporting event on TV, not down a pub. And even then, it's TVs are in the background. My local pub that I go to has all the sports on the big screens, and I just watch in passing. Just we're playing the cricket, horse racing, football, whatever it is. I watched the World Championship of Ice Hockey. I watched that on the IIHF website streaming service for I think €30. It wasn't that expensive actually. It was quite affordable. When I watched the NRL, I'm watching on the laptop. I think that we are seeing that physical transition from legacy media to new media. Some of the legacy media are going with that transition. I'm not going to get into the debate around the UK proposed legislation on social media bans for under 16s that Australia's brought in. We'll cover that in a separate video because there are implications for both channels that I have, both this channel and the History Boffin. There are implications for that. Although not many teenagers watch my content. A lot of my viewers are, 24 to 50. So I don't think I'm going to be overly impacted by the under 16 social media ban, but there's other links to the legislation in regards to linking your social media accounts to your bank account and to your ID and all that. And that's where there's a grey area over, freedom from, certain personal freedoms under the law. It could be challenged in the High Court. So we'll see what happens there, but that's a separate issue. Looking at the viewership for my World Cup coverage so far, it's a lot of 25 to 34-year-olds, a few older viewers, but not as many as previous tournaments. But look, as I say, when people are saying they're shifting away from the TV broadcasting to online broadcasting, that's a shift that's been happening for a good, it's accelerated during the pandemic, but it's definitely been going on, I would say, since the 2016 Euros. So the last decade, there's definitely been a shift that's accelerated in the last 6 years, but started about a decade ago. So that's not a new thing. That's a trend that is continuing. And we are seeing a lot of discussion around streaming services, advertised revenue, broadcast rights, broadcast partners, certain legacy media broadcasters setting up streaming services, obviously KO Sports and Stan Sports in Australia. And I'm technically with the NRL website, watch NRL and watch AFL, that's the KO Sports feed, which is basically the Fox feed. We are seeing that shift. I with my old laptop, which I had for many years, which is dead. It's over there on my chair. It died a while ago. When I was still living with my grandparents when I first started the channel, so the 2018 World Cup, I did and some of the European and FA Cup games that I watched, I did use my gaming headset as headphones, so I didn't hear all the noise. But then because they're noise cancelling, there's me effing and blinding, and then they're like poking their head and going, shut the door again, watch the language. So I actually just I've tried. I don't enjoy it with the headphones on. I think everyone's different. But my speakers on this Chromebook I've got are better. The picture quality is better as well. It's a much better system. It's an easier system to navigate. The layout's better. The only frustration I have is the keyboard being different to a Windows keyboard. That's the only thing. Only major difference is it's a Google Chromebook keyboard where there's a few keys in different positions and changes to say, other than that, I think it's a better system. I know there's a lot of tracking cookies and they're targeted advertising. That's a price you have to pay, but I'm a YouTuber, so I've got a Google account, so it's really everything was really easy to set up and get going. And my YouTube account is also my Google account, which is kind of easy. Keep everything in one place, so it's all good. But I have watched World Cup and Euros games and club games, in fact, sport in general, with the headphones on. I think the one where you can get away with it, where it's really enjoyable, is motorsport. I might do that for the 6 hours of Watkins Glen IMSA race coming up. I might try and watch that with headphones on for the whole 6 hours just to get the engine note. When you're watching motorsport with headphones on, it's a different experience, especially if you're a petrol head like me. But, or as the Americans would say, gearhead. But I don't mind watching because if the thing is, nothing beats being in a stadium. I'll give it that. And it's been a long time since I've actually gone to a sporting event, but I don't mind watching without. I've tried it with, and it after a while gives you a headache. It's too loud. But everyone's different. Everyone has, speaking of motorsport, Phillip Island lost another bike event, so sadly motorsport places left. End of an era. I think Phillip Island is it's not a bad circuit, but at the same time, there are better circuits in Australia now for facilities and stuff. I know it's not World Cup related, but there are there's better circuits out there for facilities and modernisation and investment. I do think motorsport in Australia and New Zealand. I think there's, a great culture. It doesn't matter if it's bikes or cars. I think there does need to be facility investment, though. And I think Phillip Island is like a few circuits around the world that you would have to do massive layout changes to get it up, keep it at Grand Prix standard. And that costs money. And there's obviously that big debate around stadiums in Australia and where the money comes from. Look at Shark Park in the NRL for the Cronulla Sharks. It's basically they just can't develop it. They run out of money. They can't develop it. And stadiums, New South Wales, there's a lot of politics there. And I think the fact that less and less less motorsport events are using the facility is a sign that either they need to come to some kind of redevelopment plan, or it's going to become like a sport. We'll see what happens. There's definitely a cost aspect to running a motorsport team as well. But Phillip Island, it's an iconic circuit. It's iconic. It's an iconic sporting venue, but they've got to find other ways of making income. Look at Donington here in the UK. They've had their money issues. They've had their redevelopment plans flawed. They get around that with hosting Download Music Festival every year and other massive events other than motorsport to make revenue. A lot of sports teams who have stadiums like rugby and football and cricket, in the off season they will host other events to make money in order to then fund potential further improvements and upgrades, or to fund teams to make sure that they're financially viable. So the operators of Phillip Island potentially need to do what Donington Park here in the UK does with hosting a music festival and then car and bike shows and other things other than motorsport in order to to raise capital that way by getting fans through the turnstiles by hosting other events that aren't necessarily motorsport related. Because I think that's the only way that football stadiums do it, rugby stadiums do it. Well, they'll have live music concerts, they'll have open air boxing, they will host other sports and become like a like Wembley's obviously hosts football, rugby league, NFL. I think rugby union's been played at Wembley. The old Wembley used to have a dog track, so there were multi-sport venues, so there was always something happening to make money. I think that's where Phillip Island potentially could reinvent itself and also gain that extra revenue coming in for upgrades that are necessary to keep it a world-class motorsport venue. Problem is you have the seagulls, and the weather on Phillip Island can be so changeable. I think Phillip Island is a culture problem. Its residents are very old demographic who would fight against other events. Again, yes, that is another issue, is its location. Its location, its accessibility, the surrounding communities around Phillip Island and on Phillip Island also do not help it. It's not got a young, vibrant community around it. I totally agree with that. And I think that's one thing that goes against it. I think if the locals who want to continue to benefit from it being a major attraction, bringing people into the community who spend money, contribute to the local economy when events are on, they're going to have to go with the flow and accept that they're going to have to be more welcoming. I think in order for the local economy to thrive, they need Phillip Island, the motor racing circuit, to adapt, modernise, and improve. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of problems there. It's an iconic circuit. It's an iconic venue. But the locals as well, sport does have an economic benefit for a community. Now, we can discuss who pays for stadium upgrades. Does it private money? Is it publicly funded through the taxpayer? Is it a mix of private and public investment? We've had this debate even when I did the football club history, talking about stadium issues that clubs have had in regards to who pays for the new stadium or who pays for the stadium to be upgraded. We see it in North American sports. Some of the stadiums that are being used for this World Cup have used taxpayer money to be built for billionaires who have their teams to continue to make money and not really have to spend a lot of money on that kind of investment. So, and we're seeing the debate in Chicago and Kansas City around stadium redevelopment. We're seeing it in Florida with Tampa about who pays for the new stadium, basically. And so that as a point is very interesting. That who ends up footing the bill for these upgrades to sporting facilities, because it has been proven that having a pro sports team or major sporting events in a city, in the short term, on Olympics, okay, yeah, a World Cup, you're getting more. It's a longer tournament, and therefore more locals and overseas and travelling fans from other parts of the country will come in, spend a lot of money in a very short space of time, and really boost the local economy. There is an economic benefit to having a sports team in your community or in your district, because when you have the stadium developments or stadium expansions, that creates construction jobs. With increased capacity, more fans, more visitors to an area will come into an area and spend money on hotels, transportation, food and drink, so the taxi firms, Ubers, that kind of thing. So local transportation companies, private companies will make money. Money will also go into public transportation as well. And traveling fans are purchasing train tickets and bus tickets, that gets pumped back in to the operating costs. Because if then the trains and buses that may be privately, publicly split with their ownership make money, that goes back into the economy. Hotels, bars, restaurants, other tourist attractions will make money. And then the stadium itself, it creates jobs. So talking about Phillip Island, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one. And look what we've seen at this World Cup. Some host cities in the US especially are not seeing the uptick in hotel bookings and Airbnb bookings. A lot of fans have realised outside of the big cities, it's actually cheaper to get a hotel, get an Airbnb, or find a guest house or motel at a lower cost than staying in Boston. They're staying outside. Instead of staying in Seattle, they're staying outside Kansas. They're staying in the Midwest, somewhere else in a small Midwest town. So the smaller communities having that economic benefit, but the problem is the bigger metro areas were expecting to have to lay on extra accommodation, and they priced it too high. Whereas the smaller towns and cities could be in the same metro, gone, we're going to undercut our big cousins in the big city 20 miles down the road. We're going to have our hotel prices at a third of the cost. So there is definitely the World Cup so far. We've seen some really ingenious ways that fans have budgeted very well and got round high travel costs and high hotel and accommodation costs by staying off the beaten track, in more rural communities or small towns or smaller cities, and then they find their way to the game and then go back to whatever town or city they're staying in, and it's benefiting that smaller city's economy really well, and the bigger cities not fully feeling the benefits of that. Although Dallas and Boston have definitely found out the last week, 10 days, that Europeans can drink and be merry whilst doing it. I know there was concerns that like the English and the Croatians would have a punch up. They didn't. There were concerns that the Germans would potentially have a punch up with the Scots. They didn't. The Norwegians then joined in the merriment. The Dutch, again, there's been clashes before with the Dutch and the English and the Croatians. Hasn't happened in Texas. We've seen the only flare up was between the Algerians and the Argentinians in Times Square, and that was a small group of limited group of individuals for whatever reason decided to. There was an issue there in Times Square, and other than that, there's been hardly any. There's been a few times where the police have said, "You've drunk. You've got to move on. You've had a bit much. We're cutting you off. We're not going to arrest you, but can you please go back to your hotels?" It's that kind of thing. There's been a couple of little minor flashpoints, but nothing on the levels we saw at Euro 2000 or France 98 or 2016 Euros. Nothing on that level. Even in Germany 2006, there was a massive clash between Polish and German fans in Dortmund. 2012, there was some ugly scenes. We haven't seen it. 2024 in Germany 2 years ago, the fan experience was mostly positive. The only complaints fans had was the public transportation in Germany, the trains especially, could not cope. And that is a well-known thing that people think the German trains are really good. They are less reliable here than here in the UK. And that is fact. The German trains are actually now less reliable here in Europe than here in the UK. Even the Italian train, the Italian trains are some of the most reliable in Europe. Yep, that's a thing. So the complaints that fans have had so far, take away the prices that hotels and stadiums and some bars have put in, restaurants put in place. Public transportation is the big one. So accessibility to stadiums. That always seems to be the biggest gripe, is stadium accessibility and public transportation. You know, we saw it in Germany, one of the most efficient countries in the world. We saw some issues in Japan and Korea in 2002, where they just, while they've got very efficient, underground subway systems, metro systems, and high-speed rail and normal rail lines, there was still like a capacity limit that was reached. So it's an interesting one. I think looking to the games today, especially the Netherlands, Sweden, that's going to be a fan fest. The Swedish fans always travel well. The Dutch fans are famous for their orange army. Really looking forward to that game, by the way. Really looking forward to it. Just from the fan perspective, the colour in that stadium, golds, oranges, yellows, blues. It's going to be a colourful stadium. So you can definitely tell there's going to be any empty seats at that game. That kicks off 6 p.m. my time. So I've got a good, what is it? What time is it now? It's nearly 10. It's 10 to 9 my time. So I've got a good 9 hours. I've got a good 9 hours until kickoff. So I I might get a bit of a power nap in and then have my lunch, pasta carbonara, and then have my curry for dinner. So I'm going to have pasta carbonara for lunch, and then I'm going to have a curry for dinner. Then I'm going to sort out my work uniform for Monday. But talking about like the viewership, while I haven't covered every game and done match reviews in every game, there's a few games I've watched where I've been so tired afterwards that it's just both Canada games. The Canada 6-0 win, I woke up at 10 to midnight and watched the whole game and was like, okay. And then I fell asleep straight afterwards. And then I woke up late for work and was like, shit, I've got to get to work. And we're in a heat wave here. So I was like, I'm really late for work. I could have done a match review for that, but I was so tired. This is the frustrating thing is the kickoff times for the European fans. Now, the Dutch game against Sweden, that's a normal kickoff time for us over here. It's 6 p.m. Both Scotland games have kicked off very late in the evening, and I've only caught a few minutes of both Scotland games. There are some games that at my time are like kicking off at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. That's when I'm waking up for work. So as I say, I'm not able to watch every game. And this is the first year I haven't booked off the group stages of a tournament. I generally watch as much of the group stages as possible because generally the knockout games are more favourable in the evenings for viewership and therefore match reviews. But this is the first time that I haven't. Plus, that would be all my allocated annual leave for the year done if I did that. So I had to make a choice. And with the contract change at work, this first month, 2 months, it's just not really feasible. There's a lot of massive changes happening and structural changes. So booking holidays is not a good idea at this time. There's a lot of frustrations going on. I will discuss in a members video. You should become a member, by the way. It's $1.99 a month. Top membership tier, 99p. Low membership tier. I think that works out as I think $2.99 or $1.95, something like that. I'll have to look at the exchange rate, but membership fees aren't ridiculous. You should become a member, then you can hear me whinge about my day job. Great fun. And our heat wave, great fun. Now the kickoff times, I mean, look, I understand why they've done it. I would have lunchtime kickoffs on the East Coast, early afternoon, and then the later ones on the West Coast. But they've done some West Coast kickoffs at the middle of the day. I just how they've sort of done that, is that for the domestic TV audience in North America or the European TV audience and Asian TV audience? So they've worked out the big draw nations already for the broadcasting. So that's why I think the Netherlands, Sweden on a Saturday early evening, they've worked out they're going to get a lot of European viewers. FIFA have worked out, and also they've worked out there's a big Scandinavian descended population in the US and Canada, and the Dutch. There's not as much of a Dutch descended population in the US as people think. In certain states like New York, obviously there's that historical link because obviously the Dutch New Amsterdam was the name of New York for many, many years. There are a lot of Dutch descended people in the northeast. There's a lot of Scandinavians, so the Norwegians and the Swedes will be well supported over in the US and Canada. I was surprised that they had Australia-USA game in the day. That was not the viewing prime time for the US. I think they worked out they were trying to get as many Aussie fans as possible to tune in. A lot of Socceroos fans would have watched that. I think FIFA have worked out, doesn't matter what time the US are playing, it's the height of summer. So a lot of people I think they've worked out, trust me, they're not. It might surprise you, but I actually think that worked well for the Australian TV audience. And it also worked well for the European TV audience. A lot of the American players play in Italy, Germany, Spain, and England. So we're very familiar with a lot of the American players, and a lot of the Aussie players have got play over here as well. I think they've worked out that having the game, the way they've scheduled. I mean, look, the games that I've managed to watch, I'm just going to go through. Hang on. So I watched the USA Paraguay game. That was the 4-1. The viewership figures for that on the channel as World Cup games go were quite good. The Qatar Switzerland game, I watched as well in full. The Brazil-Morocco, I watched a little bit of it, then I fell asleep. So I saw Vinicius Junior's goal, second half, I fell asleep. It was that time, I was trying to watch 4 games in a day there, the USA, Paraguay, Qatar, Switzerland, Brazil, Morocco, and Haiti, Scotland. I was trying to do it all in, big chunk. Couldn't do it. I tried it last weekend, could not do it. The Australia-Turkey game, I managed to watch that one, early hours my time. So I managed to watch that one. I felt it later that day. But then I did my history of FC Tun video straight after. The Germany Curacao game I watched. Spain Cape Verde I watched. Belgium Egypt, that was just, I'm not making it through that. Tried it, fell asleep about 5 minutes into the game. France Senegal, again, tried to give it a go. Got about 20 minutes in, conked out. Portugal DR Congo I watched in full. England Croatia, obviously, that was a perfect timing, prime evening slot for that over here. USA Australia, but then you notice England Croatia was Wednesday. It was Wednesday. It's now Saturday, so I tried to watch a few more games. I watched the Canada Qatar game, but I didn't do a match review. I was absolutely shattered. I couldn't sleep very well, so I was sort of fitfully sleeping. Watched the game, and I was like, it's 2 o'clock. It's like 1:30 in the morning. I'm not doing a YouTube video at 1:30 in the morning my time. I have neighbours. I have thin walls in this block of flats, and then I tried to stay away. I tried to give it a go, and then I just conked. But no, USA Australia. I think I watched that one in full. Scotland Morocco, I got a few minutes in. I watched the Moroccan goal, and then I fell asleep. Turkey Paraguay, I fell asleep for a few minutes. I missed the sending off for Miguel Almiron, but I watched most of the first half and a fair bit of the first half, and then I woke up and watched a fair bit of the second half. I tried to give it a go; it just wasn't feasible. Every other game I haven't watched. I watched about half of the games so far. About half of the games. I've not watched every nation. It's just not feasible. The Netherlands, Sweden, I am watching. Germany, Ivory Coast, I'm watching. I might try and pull an all-nighter tonight. I might try and do it. I doubt I will. I doubt I will be physically awake by the end. I really doubt I'll get through every game played today. Well, the early hours for me in the morning, but every game played today. Watching on the internet, I mean, it's something. Send off for covering mouth with players is in dispute. I knew where to get. No, there was an incident in the Champions League between Sporting Lisbon and Real Madrid where a Sporting player racially abused or homophobically abused a Real Madrid player. It created a lot of headlines. There was an appeal against the send-off because it was reported to the referee that something had happened. It snowballed, it spiraled. It was big news over here in Europe because Mourinho is the manager of Sporting Lisbon. Or was the manager of Sporting Lisbon, should I say, at the time. And, there was it really spiraled and it became a big talking point. About March, it was in March. So FIFA have decided we're going to change the rule over unsportsmanlike conduct for that particular offence. Whether it's right or wrong to do that is, open for debate. But FIFA decided to look at the unsportsmanlike conduct, levels of charge, yellow to red. Miguel Almiron's got that in his game from his time at Newcastle United. I remember he got booked for some silly things, and I think he got sent off a couple of times playing for Newcastle over here in England. It's hurt his team because he's a key player for them. He is a creative player. He has got a bit of skill about him. He is a hard worker, box to box, and that's going to hurt Paraguay for their next game. It'll be interesting to see if the Paraguayan FA appeal that. We've seen more red cards in this tournament than the whole of Qatar already. So send-offs are definitely up. I think FIFA got stricter on they penalties. You can't get sent off for giving away a penalty unless it's a second bookable offence or severe foul play. If it's a goal scoring opportunity, but if it's outside the box by a foot, you get sent off, like in the Qatar-Canada game. To me, that's still a send-off. It's a clear goal scoring opportunity. He's the last man apart from the goalkeeper, and he takes the Canadian attacker out. But they've changed that. So some of the rule tweak. I like what they've done with VAR. the referees are now fully mic'd up. I think if they didn't do that, the American fans would have had a riot. I think that needs to stay. I'm not overly sold on the AI camera thing that the refs have. Ref cam. I don't really like it when I watch rugby league. I don't like it when I'm watching ice hockey. They tried it in rugby league in the Super League for a while. The stupid headsets, it didn't work. Fans found it really annoying and unnecessary. There was also a cost attached to that, which the sport doesn't have. Football obviously has the money. Whether that is here to stay long term in the European leagues and in international football, we'll see because of the attached cost. Some leagues have more money than other leagues, and who pays for it? So AI ref cam reminds me of the infrared shots in movie press. A little bit, yeah, I can see that. It reminds me of a video game a little bit, first person view. Yeah, not third person, but first person view in a video. It reminds me of some of the Call of Duty games a little bit, and some of the Gears of and GTA 5, where you got that first person view, which I didn't like. I didn't like first person view in GTA. I didn't mind it in Call of Duty and Battlefield series, but it doesn't work for me. And so to me, it's an unnecessary expense. But again, then you can also review the referee footage of what he sees in a game. That's an interesting development. I think it's a bit of overkill. I think it's an unnecessary cost that I think when we get back to our regular league football in August, September, in a couple of months' time, that's an additional cost that the league's got to pick up, and some leagues make more money than others in revenues. That is a cost that not every federation can afford. That is the problem. German ref in Australia game getting cramps, taking pickle juice was pure comedic. It was, but at the same time, we've seen referees go down with injuries, do hammies, do knees, do Achilles. I don't know where was the Australia USA game being played. It was been played in Seattle, and Seattle's experienced the Pacific Northwest has had a heat wave. In that part of the Pacific Northwest, in like parts of British Columbia, Oregon, and Washington, temperatures have dropped a little bit. But you've also got to remember these officials are traveling just as much as the teams, and there is that recovery period. There's that jet lag recovery period. North America is a big continent. It's very similar to the Russia World Cup with the sheer geographical coverage that you're doing. It's the recovery time. Because all the officials have to go through the same training regimens as players to keep fit. They've got to be able to cover the miles. And he just pulled up a cramp. It happens. Even the best players cramp up. Conditioning is important. And I think the referees have to be at a certain level of fitness to referee at the elite level. They have to go to fitness camps and the conditioning camps to get ready for tournaments like this. Another thing that when people cramp up, and this has happened, is it's hot, humid, muggy conditions. It's generally what does you with cramp. Seattle is a very damp city. It's a very damp city. And that's sportsmanship. That's good sportsmanship to look after the officials and your opponent in that sense. And that was a bit of a testy game as well. There was some challenges going in. There were some flare-ups, and I think that took a little bit of sting out of the game for a couple of minutes and just calmed things down. I think the referee might have done a tactical cramp, but I think he handled the game quite well. I think the Aussies and the Americans, there were some testy moments. There was a bit of needle in the game. I think things were said in the build-up in the media, and some of the Aussie fans have been, the Socceroos are on the piss. Your president's a sex pest kind of chants that they've been going around saying. That's riled a few up. I think there was a little bit in the game there. There was a little bit in the game. Now, as I say, whether that's a good or a bad thing, I don't know. But the fact that the player helped out is good. But Aussie athletes are always good sports. So it doesn't matter the sport the Aussies are playing; they are always good sports for the most part. For the most part, it's part of the culture, isn't it? No, but at the same time, you got to feel for the game. But the ref in the Paraguay Turkey game, okay, there's ways to ref it. You can let the game flow by letting a lot of things go that other refs pull up. You can be a balanced ref, or you can be a strict ref. Sometimes you've got to play the referee as well. You've got to adapt your game to who is officiating. It happens in rugby league and rugby union. It happens in ice hockey as well. Sometimes you'll see who the referee, as a player, you know all the officials really. As a player, you get to know the officials, and the officials get to know the players, especially when it comes to regular season league play, right? And so you get a working relationship. You can work out this referee calls a tight game. He's going to call everything. This referee is going to be a bit more balanced and let a few things go and try and get the game to flow. Or that referee is going to get a lot of stuff go, and it's only the really serious, blatant stuff that he's going to call. So you have an idea of what a referee and his assistants are going to do and how they perform, especially at international level. The amount of qualifiers and friendlies where you need a neutral referee at some point, they would have come across this referee. You hear in the media as well. This referee has a higher percentage of bookings per game than this referee, and so therefore there is definitely an aspect of you've got to be aware of the officials and what they're like, their personality as well. Kalina was obviously the best. He took no nonsense, but he let the game flow. Kalina is the prototypical referee that you want. He's pragmatic and flexible. He can sense the mood of the game. If the game's been played in a high-paced, positive way, he's going to let a lot of stuff go because there's no niggle. If the game's been played in a certain way, he's going to clamp down very, very quickly. He'll look at the personalities of the senior players. Has this player got a track record for foul play? Has this player got a track record for being respectful? Is this team going to crowd me when I give a decision? He took no shit. Pierluigi Collina is the prototypical referee who was a very pragmatic referee. Depending on the situation, he could be very strict, very lenient, or very balanced. He had a good working relationship with the senior players across Europe. So the captains in European games, the Italian league as well. He got a good feel of what a game was going to be like before the game even kicked off. He would have a good feel for what the coaches were going to be like. Even the coaches on the touchline rarely argued with Pierluigi Collina. He is still involved with the referees today, getting them up to standard. When they do rule changes, I think his opinion is asked upon. Overall, games have been played hard but fair. No team has gone totally crazy yet, despite the leg break in the Canada game was the shocking one for me. You actually heard the crack of his leg over the pitch side microphone. No, straight red, no need. But the Messi one, where Messi got away with a potential career ender, that's not gone down well. So, and that's with VAR as well. Looking at that, I think Messi's got away with one there, and I think Argentina can be very, very fortunate that he stayed on the field. Yes, he scores a hat trick, as helps as well, but there's definitely a debate around consistency. Again, the VAR team is human. There's going to be interpretations of the laws are going to be different. And the referee personalities are going to be different. Some referees believe clamping down early on foul play and setting a standard, saying it will not be tolerated, is the way to go. Others will let a few things go because the fans enjoy it. That's the thing. Got also the atmosphere. Is the atmosphere in the stadium a positive one or a negative? Is it a tense atmosphere? If it's a positive atmosphere, we'll let the game flow a bit. We've only had the one goalless draw so far, so I'm going to look at goals per game in the average, and we'll look at red cards per game average as well, because we're already double Qatar, and we're only this far into the group stage. I don't know if there's been a directive from FIFA to clamp down on certain tackles and certain acts of, with Almiron, for example, where it's seen as, what's the terminology? I used it earlier. It's going to annoy me now. I'm tired. You can tell I'm tired. Oh God, not bringing the game into disrepute. What is it? There's no. I used the terminology earlier. What would he get? What would his send off be for? Anyway, yeah. So I think the VAR, as I say, has worked well. I don't think there's anything apart from the Messi no red card, which a lot of people say he should have been sent and it should have been reviewed. I think VAR has worked very, very well. It's better now than 2018. When I said in 2018, I think there was a good basis for the VAR system. Yes, they keep changing the remit and tweaking it, but I do think it's working better now than in previous tournaments. South Korea, Mexico, the most boring game so far. We still didn't get a goalless game. So, and the Mexicans have won 2 from 2. So I think Mexican fan. I haven't watched any of the Korea games, to be fair. I've watched none of the Mexico games either, so I can't comment on the quality on show. But at the end of the day, it's definitely a talking point. I've not seen any terrible games yet. I think some teams have not played to their potential and have underperformed. Spain, Portugal, for example, have definitely underperformed. But other teams, while they've won games, are still showing some vulnerability. So England and Germany, while they've won well on the scoreboards, they've been exposed when the game was still tight. So Germany being 1-0 with Curacao, no one had that on their bingo card, and they were exposed defensively in that moment. And there was that period before the first hydration break where Germany were not running away with it. And then the hydration break comes, and then the momentum swings, and then Curacao couldn't get that momentum back. England, Croatia, England go ahead, pegged back, go ahead, pegged back, and then second half they finally arrested that momentum swing. Again, the hydration breaks had an impact when all the goals were scored in the first half. And there were some frailties exposed, but at the same time, the mentality of England's different now under Tuchel than it was under Southgate. If that was a Southgate team, go 1-0 up, get pegged back. I don't think we score a second. Go 2-1 up, we get pegged back. We don't score a third. Go 3-2 up, we'd start defending deep. So I think the mentality with England's changed to a more positive attacking mindset and get the ball out. None of this aimless passing around it. There is more intent with the passing, more movement off the ball, more pace on the ball. They're still called South Korea to me as well, because North Korea still exists. A lot of people just say Korea, and you're talking about South Korea, but many people call them South Korea still. I think, like I said, we've only had the one goalless draw, and that wasn't the worst game. That wasn't the worst game at the tournament. Was the goalless draw with Curacao and Spain? That was actually quite an entertaining game in the sense that the desperation and the commitment from the Curacao, not Curacao, Cape Verde. You can tell I'm tired. Cape Verde, the effort and the energy and the commitment and teamwork, and the fact they actually had troubled Spain a little bit on the counter attack. And if they had scored from that corner, I mean, God, if they had scored then right at the end of the game, and he had headed that either side of Simon or with a bit more pace on it, I mean, Christ, there'll be an inquisition in Spain if that was the case. That would have been Spain's worst defeat at the World Cup that makes Northern Ireland and Switzerland pale into comparison with their victories over Spain at previous tournaments. I think not all is not well in the Spain camp. I think it's definitely all is not well in the Spain squad. And we've seen internal divisions within the Spain setup derail them in many a previous tournament where they've promised much and delivered little. And then they had that golden patch nearly 20 years ago where they just won everything. We could be seeing some fractures in that Spain dressing room. Even though they won the Euros 2 years ago, I don't think all was well with Spain 2 years ago. And I'm being deadly honest. I don't think all is well with Spain necessarily. I think there are definitely some divisions within that within the locker room there. There's a lot of club rivalries between Real, Barcelona, Atletico, Bilbao, and and some of the other Valencia and the Betis and Sevilla, those big clubs in Spain. I think there's definitely bring that all together, plus the players that have moved from Spain to other clubs in Europe. There's definitely that not a fully unified playing group there, and that's undone Spain many times in the past. Same with France, although France seem to be a little bit more positive now. I think Deschamps has finally figured out how to deal with some of the big egos like Mbappe. And Deschamps, I mean, Zidane's going to be replacing him at the end of the tournament. And we can discuss the pros and cons of Zidane, considering he hasn't been in management for a little while. How Zidane's going to do as... Oh, somebody saw the t-shirt out. And we can, have the pros, the debate about Zidane and his time away from the game since leaving Real Madrid and how he's going to cope with the egos. While he was very successful as Madrid manager, there was a lot of politics there, and that is why he's no longer the Real Madrid manager. And he was sometimes criticised for the handling of some big name players. So it'd be interesting to see if Zidane can carry on the good work that Deschamps has for many, many years. And Deschamps has been heavily criticised since he's been in charge of France. Heavily criticised, even though he's made a lot of finals and has been there a decade. There's been a lot of criticisms of Didier Deschamps and his style of play, squad selections, who's going, who's coming, how he dealt with big name players. And the French over the last 24 years have had many problems with, again, the big egos within squads and the dysfunction. From the 2002 World Cup onwards, there's, even when they've won tournaments or got to finals, there's been a question mark over dysfunction within the team, within the setup, because of a certain couple of big name skilled players. At the current time is Mbappe. Previous generations, it was like Pogba's caused a bit of ruckus in there. There was the break in 2010 World Cup when the players basically went on strike during training and Dominic lost control of the situation. So over the last two or bit decades, there's always been a discussion around will the French implode on themselves? And sometimes they do really well at tournaments, and other times they completely have meltdowns. So it's an interesting one. There are some big egos in the French setup at the moment, not just Mbappe, but there's some real big egos within the setup. Which potentially, whether the media blow up stories or over exaggerate, things that happen in training and the relationship the players have with each other, and do they all get along? There's definitely Deschamps. It's aged him. Let's just say that managing France has aged him since he left Marseille as manager. It definitely has aged him considerably since his last club gig. Whether Deschamps goes back into club management or not, I don't know. Whether he decides he's earned his euros, he's earned his money, and he retires and puts his feet up, we'll see. Zidane's definitely got a difficult task ahead of him to maintain the French competitiveness and keep them in the top five. We'll see if France, win another World Cup with what they've got. It's going to be interesting. I don't necessarily think a European team is going to win this World Cup. I think we might potentially have a shock winner. I do think we might have a shock winner. And potentially, in my opinion, a first-time winner. I think that is entirely possible that we get a first-time winner at this tournament. But as I say, we'll have to see what happens. So far, we haven't had too many stories of apart from the Tunisia team sacking their head coach after their heavy defeat in their open game to Sweden. We haven't really heard of any stories coming out of squads of player revolts and split squads. But I think some teams are not all as well. I think Roberto Martinez, I don't think he's dealing with Ronaldo particularly well. Previous coaches of the Portugal national side over, I would say the last decade, Ronaldo's got too much influence. We'll see what Morocco do. We'll see how many goals Morocco pump past Haiti. Brazil only put 3 past them. Scotland only put 1 past them. I think that's a good barometer. If they really pump Haiti, but they're going to have to adapt their game against Haiti because Haiti are going to be very, very defensive, which doesn't suit the Moroccan attack. Morocco thrive on the counter attack, and if Haiti are going to sit in there, it could be a bit of a dull game. But Morocco are a good side. I think Morocco have the best chance from Africa to make the final. They're the first African team to make a semi-final. I think they've got a good chance, but because it's an expanded tournament, it's going to be interesting to see. There's going to be a big nation. Well, Turkey's a big nation going home. But we're going to see some upsets. Capo Verde or Cape Verde and DR Congo have proven you can do it. Yeah, potentially. I think we could have a first-time winner or an unexpected winner. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a European team. If it's not a European team, could Japan do something? They've got a really good record going into this tournament, and the Dutch couldn't put them to bed. The Japanese kept coming back, and the Dutch got a very good team this year. I would say Japan are the best bet from an Asian nation. From the North Americans, yes, I will say this: the US have started in a very positive way. So have the Mexicans and the Canadians. And momentum's a big thing in sport. It doesn't matter how skilled you. Look what Greece did in 2004. An underdog and an unexpected winner can happen. Greece proved that in 2004. So we could potentially see a dark horse like that. That's where I think Morocco have that opportunity because they play a very similar style to that Greek team with a bit more flair and skill. I honestly think we could potentially see a first-time winner, but we'll see what happens. I think the US, Canada, and Mexico have a very good chance, all three nations, to go on a deep run, which really upsets the apple cart a little bit. I think the Canadians, with that 6-0 win, and the Americans, I think, scored 6 goals in 2 games and only conceding the 1. Canadians have scored the most goals they've ever scored at a tournament. They've broken their records. The US winning back-to-back games for the second time ever, and with a game to spare in the group stage, the way they're playing, they're going to break their goal scoring record at a World Cup. Mexico always do well on home soil. They're unbeaten to start their tournament. They've only scored the 3 goals, mind. So they're the least impressive of the 3 co-hosts, but all 3 co-hosts unbeaten, 2 games in. That's a good sign for the tournament. But I don't know. I really don't know what to expect, if I'm being honest. I really don't know what to expect. I haven't watched all the group stages, as I say. I haven't watched every single game. I've not seen every single team yet, so I can't comment on... I haven't seen Sweden or Netherlands play yet. Sweden had a great first game. Disappointing qualifying, mind. The Netherlands... It's going to be interesting. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. I'm looking forward to that game. I really am looking forward to that game. It's going to be really interesting to see how those teams perform, as I say. But I do think we could potentially get a first-time winner, potentially, or an unexpected winner who may not have performed as well as they could have. England obviously haven't won for 60 years, but we've now been to back-to-back European finals and a World Cup semi-final under Southgate and a quarter-final where we fluffed it against France, even though we actually played quite well in that game. But we've had a positive start to the tournament, and England generally start slowly in tournaments and struggle to score goals. 4 goals in a game at a World Cup doesn't happen often for England, so that I think is a positive sign that they on an attacking sense they played really well, and defensively they need to look at some of their defensive lineup and structure, but they're going about it a completely different way. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I mean, as I say, I've got to look at the groups and how teams are going at this point. But I do think we could have if the Dutch, the Swedes. I mean, they put 5. They scored 5 against a solid, not outstanding, but a solid Tunisian side. They put 5 past them, and with the way they went about in qualifying, they got Graham Potter back in. Suddenly, things turn around. They brought Graham Potter in. He speaks fluent Swedish, which I think helps massively. He's coached over there, so he would have a relationship with some of the players anyway. As a former club coach in Sweden, people knock that. Graham Potter is an underrated manager. I think the Chelsea experiment was a disaster. Let's just put that. It dented his confidence. It dented his self-belief a little bit. I think the West Ham experiment didn't work as well. But that's, again, two very toxic clubs to work for, as we now know in the Premier League or in English football. But Graham Potter did very well at Brighton. So I think he's an underrated manager, very underrated. We could see a European nation win, but as I say, it's going to be very, very interesting when it does come down to it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to the games today. Germany needs to put back up that good attacking performance against Curacao, against Ivory Coast, and that'll be a fun game to watch. That really will be a fun game to watch, that one. The African teams are always so unpredictable, and I do mean that in the most loving way. African teams are so unpredictable at times that there's always action in a World Cup game involving an African team. You don't know what you're going to expect with them. So they're always fun to watch. And there's always something crazy happening when like Tunisia sacking their coach. The African teams at World Cups are always mental. And sometimes they've become more structured, which I think has taken a bit of the joy out of the African teams. But like I say, Cape Verde, how well they played, and DR Congo, that tells you something. I mean, Cape Verde is one of the more stable countries in Africa, but it's a small population, small economy. DR Congo, massive population, but riven by social conflict and civil war and poverty. But what they've done, they kept their organisation, they worked their teamwork, their work rate, their fitness, and a lot of these players are actually playing in top leagues around Europe. So this is not the African teams of 30 years ago. They are proper competitive nations now at this level. But I'm looking forward to the Ivory Coast Germany game. I really am. That's going to be a fun matchup. I think the Ivory Coast's unpredictable in this current era of the Ivory Coast. And the Germans, I think they are vulnerable defensively. And if they get it wrong defensively, Neuer is not the keeper he was. I'm surprised he's the goalkeeper of choice to start for Germany, given his age and the fact that they've got some good goalkeepers in Germany now who could be in that position. He was partly at fault for the goal they conceded against Curacao. He was too far off his line, so he was in no man's land for that one. So he got his positioning wrong. He's lost that half yard of rushing out pace, so he is vulnerable. And the defence, they do have a very high line at times. And if the Ivorians get it right on the counter attack or in an attack, and they get a ball over the top of a ball out wide, the Germans are exposed, and they don't have that dominant pairing at centre back they've done in previous tournaments, a dominant defensive midfielder. So their hardcore spine of the team is not as veteran, I think, which has been a big strength of German teams in the past. Big strength. So that'll be interesting to see. But the Netherlands-Sweden is going to be the fun game for me. I'm salivating over that because the Dutch have shown themselves to be a bit defensively vulnerable and game management. The Swedes managed their game really well. Opening game, the Dutch didn't. They led twice, were pegged back twice by the Japanese. They just couldn't put them to bed. So that's going to be a fun one to watch if the Dutch have learned some lessons from their draw. And the Swedes, I mean, they bagged a hatful of goals, so that their attacking players are quite confident, which is always dangerous when you've got attacking players who are playing with confidence. It doesn't matter who the opposition are. They've got a bit of confidence about them. Considering their poor qualifying campaign, Graham Potter in his brief stint in charge has definitely turned the Swedes around. Like Pochettino with the US, there's definitely been some turnarounds for some teams. Sometimes when I have an African taxi driver here in Melbourne, they are passionate about the African teams. Of course they are. Of course there's a big African community in Melbourne. You see it when when it comes to like cricket, and you go to certain parts of the country here where you've got a big Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Sri Lankan community, and cricket's the conversation. They talk about their players very passionately. Same with the South Africans. There's a big South African community in my part of the UK, big South African expat community, and a fair few Aussies and Kiwis as well. Zinzan Brooks, who lives down the road from me, Same. Great All Black legend. But there is there's a cafe that I go to that's family run by a South African. There is a big um, uh, South African, Aussie, and Kiwi expat big community over here from everyone, and there's even a fair few Canadians over here as well. So there's a big expat community of the Dominions, as we should say, from the former Commonwealth, from the Commonwealth. So I'll call them the Anglo-Saxon Commonwealth nations to avoid distinction between other former British Empire colonies. But there's some big expat communities over here, and there is always discussions around, the cricket, rugby, the ice hockey, depending on the country, of course. But there is definitely, and they always talk passionately about their young players coming through, the prospect players, some of the veteran players, how they're doing, and you can have a conversation with them. So there's definitely that happens when you have overseas expat communities wherever you go in the world, especially in global cities like Melbourne, which attract people from all over the world to live and work and visit as tourists as well. You are going to have that blend of cultures and countries. And this is something we've seen at the World Cup, where the locals in some of the cities in the US are absolutely, they don't know what quite to make of the overseas fans. In general, African people are sad that Cameroon did not really kick on after the success of the 90s. I would say the same with Nigeria as well. I think there's definitely a feeling of underachievement with Cameroon and Nigeria, where they promised so much in the 90s with some of the great players they had, like Roger Miller and JJ Okocha and Rigobert Song, for these countries. And they're definitely, I do agree with that, I think. But the mantle's been taken on by the Ghanaians, the Senegalese, and the Ivory Coast in the regard of the African powerhouses when it comes to West African and Central African football. But yes, there is that feeling that Nigeria and Cameroon didn't kick on into the 2010s and beyond. They had their heyday in the 90s and the 2000s, but Cameroon, I think, is now the better of the two nations head to head as well for players that they develop. They're more consistent at World Cups, but they both failed to qualify, and that in itself is, I think, a blow to the psyche a little bit. Because they had both countries had a generation of players for a good 10, 15 years in the 90s and the 2000s that were household names. And Samuel Eto'o comes to mind, JJ Okocha, Kanu. There are other, like Rigobert Song, whose son played for Cameroon as well, just to put it out there. Some great players. I've also done volunteering here in Melbourne with African kids in recess between study sessions. They always grab a football and go crazy. Well, Melbourne is the hotbed of the Socceroos as well. The culture, the soccer football culture, is stronger in Melbourne than it is in Sydney or Brisbane or Perth or Adelaide. When it comes to the big cities in Australia, that is where a lot of the Aussie national team come from. Doesn't matter if it's the African background players, the European background players, even the Indigenous Aboriginal First Nations players. It's the Melbourne area. That's the city where it's like the north of England with rugby league, or the northeast for ice hockey in the US, and the border states with Canada, or AFL rugby league in Australia with that dividing line. There's sometimes you get to a country and there is regional powerhouse sports, and the hotbed for football, European football, association football in Australia, is Melbourne, and it seems to be a melting pot of all the immigrant communities. They're migrating towards. You've got the Italian community, you've got the Balkan community, like the Croats, the Serbs, the Greeks, the African nations. I think there's a fair few South American implants as well. Obviously, the other Europeans, like the Brits, the German immigrant population historically. They gravitate into Melbourne and they bring their football fandom with them. I mean, Mark Viduka is one. Christian Vieri is another one, who actually were brought up in Australia, and people forget that Christian Vieri was actually born in Melbourne. But also when we're talking about like where football or soccer is a minority sport, like Australia, same with the US and Canada, where it's not as one of the more national sports where the national sides aren't that successful historically. Um, when you've got like rugby league and AFL, I am surprised that rugby league and the AFL aren't doing more community outreach with the latest immigrant communities that have come in to you know talent scout and try and encourage the families and young people and get the tentacles in there, because Melbourne is a very interesting city. The state of Victoria is it's an AFL. AFL is king, right? But then you've got Geelong just down the coast as well, which again has a lot of immigrant communities in Geelong because of the industrial nature of that city. But it's very interesting that when it comes to association football, round ball, again a lot of the players are from the state of Victoria and those two cities of Melbourne and Geelong. Yet the other AFL and NRL aren't engaging as well with the new immigrant communities, the Africans and some of the European and South Americans. But what is interesting is the Lebanese community, the Lebanese and Turkish communities have bought into rugby league and to a certain extent Aussie rules. So that's an interesting one as a subplot. And we're starting to see some kids of South Asian origin playing rugby league as well. So, and we're starting to see at the professional level. So it's an interesting one, but I do think the two big sports, rugby league and Aussie rules, I think could do more to engage with the younger immigrant communities in cities. I think they could do a little bit more in engaging, especially with the African and the subcontinental Asian communities, especially in trying to grow the game, their sports, and engaging with communities at community level with grassroots and investment and pathways programs. So but at the same time, it's obviously a cultural thing. The subcontinental Asians like India, Pakistan, they'll be cricket. And there you go. Auskick program that AFL's for young people has been some controversy. I'll have to look into the Auskick. I'll have to look into that. I know that OzTag has done quite well. The rugby league equivalent has done quite well in engaging more youth and families into rugby league and communities that way, because it's obviously non-contact, and therefore concerned parents don't. Yeah, the OzTag is the grassroots NRL. We'll look at Auskick and what controversy is surrounding that, and the pros and cons. I know that the AFL did go overseas and look at like going to the townships in South Africa and Southern Africa, actually not South Africa, but some of the Southern African nations, especially South Africa, though, because of the success of rugby union and other team sports over there, trying to scout. They've realised that this African rugby union has got some absolute animals, and they decided to go over there and have a look about 10 years ago and try and get some pathways in place for some getting some talent over from Southern Africa. Also with the US as well, with Mason Cox, they did some combines over in the US about a decade ago as well. So an overseas kind of grassroots player program. The NRL obviously has got the European Super League to coexist with, and PNG. So rugby league is a bit more of a global player base than Aussie rules, because more nations play rugby league. But I'll have to look into how controversial is controversial? What exactly is in layman's terms has occurred with the Auskick AFL program? It seems like OzTag as a grassroots program with the NRL has been more successful and less controversial. I think is a good way of from what I can get with feedback, looking at media reports and social media, it seems that OzTag is doing a lot better for grassroots community sport than any other program in Australia. But the AFL's suddenly become has a lot of suddenly had a lot of controversies in the last few years where. So there's been some incidents. Hard to explain. Incidents of disappointing parents, or outcomes for their kids, or the communities, or also getting grassroots Aussie rules played by like Sunday pub football teams here over in the UK, the Sunday League kind of thing, where you get the grassroots amateur men's and women's teams playing. I know there's been like a discussion point around the AFLW and how it's not good quality, and how it isn't growing Aussie rules with the female player base and female fans like the NRLW is, with their expansion being a bit slower paced and more structured, and they're slowly building up the growth of rugby league. Whereas in Aussie rules in the women's game, they've overreached too quickly, and the quality isn't there. That's been a criticism of the AFL's policy in growing the women's game. There's got to be some explanation why it's been controversial. Well, it might be belong on a politics channel, but certain kids have said, positive discrimination, I think, is the term you're looking for there. So DEI policies have been, because positive discrimination is technically illegal because it means you're discriminating against another group. So Equalities Act. There is only one race, the human race. There's different skin colours. Oh, it won't get banned because we're not swearing. I think I've been very, very critical of sports DEI policies for some time. They've tried it in the NFL with the Rooney Rule. It hasn't actually worked. We've seen it with sports broadcasting. We've seen it with teams. South Africa. They had a big controversy in South Africa when it came to the cricket and the rugby union teams having to have a certain percentage of players from native African backgrounds rather than Afrikaner background, and it didn't go down particularly well, which I think impacted the team. They went about it in a more natural way in growing the game in the black population in South Africa, and now the Springboks are the best team in the world. Just going to put it out there. There was a period in the 2000s where the South African government pushed this policy of positive discrimination, and it backfired. So they sort of did it more merit, but now it's. I can see where you're coming from. That they've been a bit positive discrimination happy. At which point, then you could see potentially. Lawsuits being brought against the AFL for discriminatory policies. There we go. If that's what the controversy is, I think a lot of sports have gone down this path and are now sort of curving back to actually let's do it on merit, but also invest in engaging with immigrant communities in a positive way, and the various communities, be it Asian or African or South American or European. We've seen it. I had this discussion before with an Asian football fan from India. Why do more Indians and Pakistani and Bangladeshi kids not play football? Oh, you're racist. I said, no, it's just because they're not interested. There has been community outreach programs done by every single football club here in the UK, whereby we represent the town or the district in a city, and they want to be fans. They just don't want to play the game. They're more interested in cricket. So there is a cultural factor as well, where certain communities are more interested in cricket or football. And you're not going to convert them to Aussie rules or rugby league because it's not culturally their thing from where they're from. It's the same with when Europeans emigrate to the US and Canada. That's why you've got a lot of fans of the European club teams, is they took their fandom with them. And that's why these overseas fan groups developed and continue to exist 50 years later, with their kids and grandkids having now been born and raised in the US and Canada, and they've kept the fandom of granddad's football team from Italy or from Ireland or from England or from France or Germany or wherever they came from. So we've seen community outreach programs do it on a natural. Let's just engage with school kids. Let's engage with families at a local level, where you might go into a community and it's got all immigrants and locally born and raised kids going to school, to put pathway programs in place. And we've seen the benefits of that with the England football team. We've seen the benefits of that with the NRLW, for example, with more female participation. But then when you're doing specific targeting of positive discrimination, it backfires. It actually damages your pathway system and damages your fandom, because then you're deliberately excluding or not prioritizing everyone. You're specifically targeting a very small niche group. It backfires. It then creates resentment, and then you lose kids and families from the game. You turn communities against your project, which then has a detrimental impact going forward of community cohesion as well, because sport is a good unifier. And then it creates resentment in the schoolyard with kids. It then creates resentment within the community, where you will have in let's say a suburb, a sudden surge of, let's say the Indian families moved in there, and then you've got the Congolese families moved in there, for example. Then you've got a European family moved in there, and it's a very mixed community. Well, if the European kid is getting discriminated against in favour of the Indian kid or the African kid, that's going to create division, as I say, at home. It's going to create division at school, and it's going to create division in the workplace, because all three of the parents might actually work with each other, and suddenly it fractures the community, and it backfires, and it leads to resentment, and it leads to frustration. And then a young talented kid or a young talented adult, or even at just a community game where the adults all play at the Sunday league game, it leads to resentment, because certain players and fans go, this isn't for me anymore. I don't feel represented in the right way. I'm going to play cricket instead, or rugby league, or soccer, football, that kind of thing. And then you lose fans and young kids from the game that are your future players and future fans for generations to come. And it does create problems, which is why it should be an equal opportunity whole local community outreach program, rather than just, that's my view on it. DEI policies actually backfire and actually cause more harm than good. Just treat everyone equally and give everyone equal opportunities. Suddenly you'll see them flourish. When you do DEI policies, it backfires and harms your product. There you go. And over the last 2 years, I've noticed this more, where suddenly companies that have gone very DEI heavy over the last decade are now pulling back and going, actually, it's hurt our brand. Our sales are actually down. We've turned people off applying for jobs. We're not doing that kind of thing. It's just equal opportunity for all. That you just need some structural change behind the scenes in structure, but on the surface, you shouldn't change anything. It's the structural management style of things and funding programs for poorer communities in general, and distribution of wealth and facilities. It's just equal opportunities for all, but structural change is required with common sense, and common sense left the window since 2012. Personal view, there you go, done. Rant over. That's as political as I'll get. Because we have seen the aftermath of that now with social tensions. But so far, this World Cup, at least, has been very, very positive with the fan engagement and the just the feedback from the locals in the US and Canada and Mexico, how they've actually enjoyed having the visitors from Europe. They've enjoyed having the visitors from Australia and New Zealand. They've had a good laugh. They've had the humour. They're mingling and enjoying. But then this is why I'm surprised Las Vegas didn't get any games, because the Aussies, the Kiwis, the French and the English have been going there for the NRL and Super League games at the beginning of the season for a couple of years now, and they've raved about it. The locals enjoy it as well. It brings colour and festival and fun for a week. I'm surprised they didn't choose Vegas as a host city, but in part because of the success of what the NRL's done. Vegas enjoys having the rugby league family visiting from Australia, New Zealand and Europe every year. It does bring colour, it brings vibrancy, and you get fans, new fans being made In the US, that's one that was a surprise omission, same as Chicago. But there are stadium issues in Chicago, so I'm not surprised with that. But Chicago's got a really decent, for US standards, metro system with the L train system. So I am surprised that Chicago was overlooked. Now, whether the city councils in both Vegas and Clark County, for that matter, and Chicago with Cook County, and I forget the other one, but Cook County is the main subdivision in Illinois where Chicago is. I am surprised that at council level and at city mayoral level they decided not to try and attract the World Cup. Now, was that to do with the time zone, geographical time zone, climate, kind of thing? Maybe. Was it to do with budgetary constraints? That's another one. I mean, Vegas has got the hotel space and it's definitely heavily invested in professional sport over the last decade with the Golden Knights, the Raiders, soon to be the Athletics. They want to get the NBA there. They want to get the MLS there at some point. They've got a fantastic stadium facility with the Legion Stadium. Chicago does have the stadiums there, but again, there's discussion about at some point, Chicago Bears potentially moving out of Chicago. There's definitely financial issues within the city of Chicago and other problems structurally within the political machine in Chicago, and there has been for a long, long time. But they're two cities that really surprised me that weren't selected. Really, really surprised me. But what can you do? That was the organisers decided to go with the cities they've gone with. And does that hurt or help the World Cup? We'll see. I mean, Chicago is a massive transportation hub with O'Hare Airport. It's one of the busiest in the northern half of the US transportation hubs with Amtrak and O'Hare Airport and the interstate system. So I'm really surprised Chicago wasn't utilised. Vegas is growing as a professional sports market. There's been massive investment in sports facilities in Vegas, and Allegiant Stadium is a world-class facility. It's one of the best stadiums in the US. And it's a climate-controlled stadium with a fixed roof. So, and it has a grass playing surface which you don't need to dig up and replace with and relay over artificial turf. So I'm really surprised. And Allegiant Stadium groundskeepers have now got experience with the NRL doing the markings there and making sure that the playing surface can hold up for multiple games over a weekend. I'm surprised they weren't chosen as host locations, especially with Vegas with the amount of hotel space. And again, becoming a transportation hub with its international airport being also very accessible to the city. I'm very, very surprised with what Vegas has done over the last decade or so in regards to international major sporting events and professional sports teams. I'm very, very surprised. Fans love traveling to Vegas for the experience who aren't Vegas fans. So the NHL and the NFL, many fans who travel there are away fans. So that would have worked for me. Who's my surprise package for this World Cup? A small team think do well. Well, Turkey are really disappointed. They're already out. Spain have disappointed. Portugal have disappointed. Surprise packages, small nations. I think the north of the three co-hosts have done well. Mexico have got an established footballing history, obviously, going back a long time. But the Canadians and the US have really impressed me with how they've approached things, how they've played. Canada, they've broken their own national records for goals at tournaments and wins and all that at World Cups. The US, one more goal, they equal their goal tally record. They're going to break that. The way they're playing as well is just refreshing to see. I think they play better in their first game than their second game. So the three co-hosts have really surprised me. I think they're going to go on deep runs into the knockout stages. I think the winner may potentially not be a European side. May not be a South American side. Morocco have a good chance. I think Morocco, how they approach the Haiti game is going to be very interesting. Can they be more flexible in their style of play and be more attacking and dominant with the possession? Because Haiti is going to sit there and defend and counter attack, which is the Moroccan style. They could cancel each other out a little bit. So if Morocco can adapt the Haitian defensive style and just come out the blocks and be more attacking for 90 minutes, that would be interesting. I think it's an interesting one. I think the debutant nations too. Cape Verde have surprised me with their defensive fortitude and their fitness. DR Congo surprised me with their structure, considering they haven't qualified for a major tour, a World Cup since 1974. I think England under Tuchel are far different to what they were under Southgate. If that was a Southgate coach side, I think we potentially lose that game against Croatia, or we limp over the line and would be overly convincing. So I think that's a positive. I think Ronaldo's hurting Portugal. I think they're probably better with him not in the squad at all. But that's an issue that every Portuguese coach has had for the last 10, 12 years with Ronaldo, is the influence he has over team selection and tactics, which I think is a detriment to the Portuguese side. I haven't watched all the games. That's the problem. I haven't got a real kind of feel of how all the teams are playing. Partly because of my work hours. I'm normally getting out of bed at 3 a.m. to go to work. So I tried to pull an all-nighter last night and watch all 4 games. Yeah, that didn't work. That's happened a few times now. So I haven't watched and reviewed all the games. So I can't give a fair assessment on Sweden, for example, with their 5 win over Tunisia. I can't give a fair assessment on how Panama have played so far. I can't give a fair assessment on any number of nations. I haven't really watched Brazil in full yet, so I haven't watched the Argentinians play yet, or Uruguay. So I can't give a fair assessment on every team, big or small. But the games I've seen have been entertained with. The playing surfaces have held up well. The water breaks being booed is fantastic. The cringe celebrity fan fest whenever they're on the big screen, apart from Sinclair, the former Canadian women's team captain, she got cheered every time she was on the big screen, but she's a football player. And she's a national sporting icon in Canada. But Christine Sinclair, that's her name. Every time she appeared on the big screen in the Canada-Qatar game, the fans went berserk and were just fantastic. But every big name celebrity is just there for Instagram likes and social media flex. Being roundly booed is even by the American fans is refreshing. The fan engagement with the overseas fans, especially in Boston and Dallas, where we've seen all the famous pictures on social media and videos on social media of the Scottish, German fans and Norwegian fans in Boston, the Dutch, English and Croatian fans in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, all mingling well and getting on and drinking bars dry. I mean, I don't think the Americans fully realised they've heard the stories of us, the Scots, well, Brits in general, the Germans and the Czechs, and how much we can drink. I don't think they were fully anticipating seriously how much us and the Eastern Europeans can drink, and the Czechs as well. I don't think they fully anticipated just how much we can. They were like, "Oh yeah, we can outdrink you. Yeah, your beer's watered down. We like super strength lager and Jaeger and Southern Comfort and Jack Daniel, proper whiskey. Yeah, we can drink." And the Czechs and the Germans really make some good beer. So can the Belgians. They've got Belgium. I don't think the US especially have realised the Belgians have some really good beers. Stella, Piermans. There's the other Artois beer as well they brew. Germany, Erdinger. Have you seen some of the Bavarian beers they brew? The Czech Republic with their Pilsners. Karlovic, Croatian beer is 8%. That's strong stuff. Well, anywhere east of the Stettin, Elba, kind of in anyway east. It's vodka. Lots of vodka. Although I think it's only the Czechs. At the tournaments, Bosnians, they don't really drink so much, but Croatians like a good brew. if we're going to be honest. The Scandinavians have developed in more recent years a bit of a drinking culture. They're not really a drinking culture in Scandinavia. It's too expensive, but they've sort of slowly developed. The Dutch can drink. They can drink. The Aussies and the Kiwis. I just don't think they are fully anticipated how much the we can consume in our body weight in alcohol. I don't drink as much as I used to. I had a few beers at the pub yesterday on the way home from work before I got home, which was a mistake because I just conked out. But yeah, as I say, I don't think the American bar. There was one bar owner in Boston who did more trade in 2 days than he does on the 4th of July and St. Patrick's Day combined. He was like, I've done 4 times as much trade in 4 hours than I do over those 2 days in the year. JFK Jr. Yeah, that was yeah. Yes. That he didn't even get a cheer. He was just people just ignored him. The VPN one, people wanting to get around the geo blocks of the broadcast of the world. Well, with what's going to happen in the UK and what's happening in Australia with banning under 16s, VPN use has gone through the roof. And the VPN companies know this. The VPN companies know that some of the pay-per-view rights and get round ads and all that. Seriously, if you are a North American fan and you don't want to pay for BBC Prime, because you have to pay for that, or do you have to pay for that? I think you do. I think it is a commercial channel, and you don't have to deal with the Fox ad breaks, and you don't speak Spanish, so you don't want to watch Telemundo unless you want to have subtitles on, which can be highly distracting. Get a VPN and watch the BBC or ITV feed. ITV, you'll get ad breaks during the halftime, pre-game, and post-game, but you don't get ad breaks during play. BBC is an ad-free, channel, which is a public broadcaster. So if you are a North American fan, get a VPN and watch the UK feed. Same with the Irish feed and RTE as well. There's no ad breaks. So there's no ads during the hydration breaks. So just dropping a hint there. So the VPN companies, they're just slapping. They're making massive profits right now. But yeah, I don't know about a lot of the other European broadcasters. You would have to watch the games. I mean, just imagine watching with the Italian or the German. The German commentators would be fun, but watching the games in Italian or Spanish or Portuguese would be fantastic because they're some of the most passionate commentators. They're insane. Even if you don't understand what they're talking about, they go absolutely batshit mental. I think in regards to the big teams doing well and poorly, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Spanish manage the club rivalries and the politics in the dressing room. Portugal, I think Ronaldo is having far too much influence on the team. Big nations. As I say, I haven't seen everyone play, so I'm not going to comment on teams I haven't seen play yet and players I haven't seen perform yet. But teams that have disappointed are Turkey, Spain, Portugal. But Spain and Portugal only played the one game so far, but Turkey's technically out the tournament. I don't think they're going to. I don't think they mathematically can progress. So Turkey's been a massive disappointment. Spain were disappointing first game. Portugal were disappointing their first game. But I've been very, very pleasantly surprised with the 3 co-hosts. They look so enthusiastic, so happy to be doing it. There's a joy. They're playing with the smiles on their faces, which is dangerous. When a team is playing with a smile on its face and it's playing well, that's a dangerous sign for the opposition. And with the fact that their records are tumbling for both Canada and the US in regards to goals and progression and growth, the Canadians have come a long way in the last 8 years. Massive growth of the Canadian side of things, in part spurred on by their women's team being very successful in recent years, very similar to the US. The women's game in North America has spurred on growth in the men's game, which is fantastic. But the turnaround under Pochettino with the US team, there's been question marks in the build-up. But in the last, just the first 2 games of the tournament, they've just flipped a switch. The 2 warm-up games, they were disappointing, and suddenly they flipped a switch. It's going to be interesting when we get to the second round if the US can continue to play the way that they are. and they're going to play against tougher opposition. The Canadians, they're just a complete dark horse. They're complete unknown what they're going to do in the knockout stages. The way they played against Qatar, though, sometimes when a player gets sent off or players get sent off, it becomes a bit of a stodgy affair, and it's difficult to, break just down a defensive block. The Canadians just ripped them to pieces. They just didn't stop. Even with the nasty injury to, I think it was Kono, leg broke, horrible injury. No, it was not nice. They didn't show any. You saw his leg was broken. No replays. He didn't scream out in pain though. That was mad. He must have been in so much shock. True. I think they made some defensive blunders at the last World Cup, but there's been a fair bit of player turnover since that last tournament in goal, and a few of the defenders have changed. I think the coach, I think it's Jesse March now is in charge, so he's got a different philosophy on how to approach things. He's the new coach. His philosophy is different to the previous incumbent. So Jesse March, I think, didn't quite work how he wanted it to. In the Premier League, I think he was a little bit early in his coaching career for that. I just don't think he was ready, but I think he's learned his lessons from what happened at Leeds United. And I think Jesse March is doing a very, very good job. He's an honorary Canadian as he is an American, but you can see the passion he has on the touchline, even as an American coaching, potentially America's biggest sporting rival in Canada. When it comes to in the last 20 or 30 years, he's bought into the Canadian way, and they've adopted him as an honorary Canadian with Jesse March. I do think it was the wrong time in his coaching career to coach in Leeds United when he did. I think it just wasn't the right time. But look at the passion he has on the sideline. Look at the passion he's got there. He really, every goal, he was riding every emotion. And I think he was very angry with the broken leg and the tackle, and how the referee initially went yellow card only when it was clear and obvious that tackle from behind, nasty. You heard that on the pitch side, Mike, because it was happening in a quiet bit of the game. That the crowd died down a little bit after Christine Sinclair had been on the big screen. It had gone a bit quiet. It was facing away from goal, and it was a horrendous challenge. Horrendous challenge. They didn't even show replays of the challenge, so you don't know how bad, but it was bad. Nasty challenge, deserved a red card. It led to sort of then the game got a bit spicy. There was a few flare-ups at that point. Qatar were already down a man, and then then Canada went, "We're going to score some more goals and have fun for our teammate." And so I think that spurred them on as well to keep on with that. The Canadians came back from behind in their first game as well to draw level. So they had been tested a little bit defensively, and they came from behind in their first game to get back in the game. But they know they're not going to win the World Cup. They can go on a bit of a run, though, I think, and build some momentum, which can really help grow the game in Canada. I think we could see a team do what Greece did in 2004, like a Morocco. I think a team like that can just grind out results and play on the counter attack. I think we could see like a Morocco, a Greek-esque style of team. But as I say, Canada are going to play Switzerland in their final game. That could be fun. Not gonna lie, that could be a lot of fun. I'm actually looking forward to that one because if Canada top the group, they get a home knockout game. So I think it's in Canada's interest to just go out there and play with freedom and expression. The goal difference is in their favour. So they've got a strong goal difference. That could be dangerous for the Swiss, because the Swiss have been a bit. First game they didn't take a kick on, and they allowed the Qataris to get that draw. Second game they turned it on, so that's going to be a really interesting matchup. I think the Canadians are going to go for it. I think Jesse Marsh is going to go for it, and Hakan Yakin, former Swiss international, who played in 2004, by the way, at that Euros. I think he needs to get his team ready. And I think with the way the Swiss play, they don't play on the counter attack. So if the Canadians are starting to really have fun in the wide areas, it's going to be interesting to see how the Swiss build their attacks. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Anyway, it's now gone 10 o'clock. It's been a nice little live stream. It's not often that I do a live stream at this time of day on a Saturday. Normally it'd be later, but of course the football's on later. So I'm going to sort of try and get a little bit of a power nap. I think I'm going to call it a stream, unless anyone's got any more questions. Like I say, the Netherlands-Sweden is the first game of the day, then Germany-Ivory Coast. And I'm really looking forward to that Netherlands-Sweden game, just for the fan point of view. The atmosphere the Swedes bring and the Dutch bring to a tournament is always fantastic. I think Germany, we'll see how good Germany really are, because they look defensively frail to me. If Ivory Coast get out to a quick start and let's say get an early goal, I think that's going to force the Germans to have to come out and play when they play with a high line. And I don't think, with what the pace that Ivory Coast have, I don't think they can afford to do that. So we'll get an idea of where the Germans are at in the group stage as well. Curacao, the hydration breaks, they just annoy the fuck out of me. We're not going to see them at the next Euros. Let's just say that, unless the weather conditions hit that temperature threshold. I think UEFA will go, no, we're not doing this. And I don't think FIFA do it at the next World Cup somehow, unless, again, weather conditions dictate. So we shall see. But no, thank you for the questions. It's been an interesting one, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I think the Japanese might have a good chance to go on a run. I have a funny feeling the Japanese, with their record going into this tournament, how they've been playing as a group over the last 4 years, Japanese could be a dark horse. But again, only haven't seen them play against the Dutch yet. I know it was 2-2 in the end, but they I think, with how they've been playing recently, especially the last 2 years, they are dangerous. So there we go. But thank you very much for everything. I appreciate it. Keep your eyes peeled for match reviews. I'm giving the NRL a little bit of a break for a couple of weeks because I've got a little bit rugby league fatigued. It always happens in the origin period that I go, it's mid-season. Let's just have a little break from the rugby league. But I will get back on my rugby league content soon. But from me for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some content for you all later on today. Ta-da for now.